To enable logging in SharePoint, you can go in and be very specific about the logging you want. One thing to be aware of is that just like any logging on your servers, there is a performance concern that you need to look at. Every time, the more data that you log, the more processing is done, the more hard drive space is taken up. So you need to be very aware of what you're doing. That being said, it's critical, and you can find out a lot about what's happening, where your slowdowns are, where problems may need to be, where you may have challenges on your server. It can be very, very prolific. As a matter of fact, this is one of the big challenges that SharePoint has had throughout its life cycle. One of the main challenges of keeping a server up and running is making sure that the whatever logging drive that you have doesn't get filled up and that you get in trouble with that. More often than not, the logging levels are the primary challenge for servers dropping out of the farm. That being said, always ensure that you set restrictions on the log size, and ideally you want a dedicated location for logs. You want to have these in some location that are off the server, maybe a network attached storage, some type of area that if something happens and your logs get too far out of hand, they're not going to affect the operating system and be able to keep you rolling even though your logs may be lost. The logging levels, this shouldn't be anything really challenging to you, but we'll go through there and let's see what SharePoint does. We've got the levels that we have with SharePoint are none. This is the default. Be aware that that's what you're looking at, because as you go through, you may be wanting that information. By default, you don't actually get the logging information, which gives you maximum performance on the server. Keeps you very happy, keeps your users very happy. Critical. A lot of times you actually want to change over to critical for most of the logging levels, or at least the items that you're most concerned about. This is because you generally don't get critical logs that much. You're not going to have a huge log size proliferation, but you do want to know anytime there's critical issues involved. That being said, when we go into the Health Analyzer, you'll see that the Microsoft team has been very good about bringing those pieces up and making sure that you have other options to see where those critical errors are happening at. Then we go down to the simple error. These are things that are not working, but they're not impeding your server's progress or not impeding the system. So know that you've got that next level going down. Then you go down to warnings, which, as we know, are, hey, you probably want to take a look at this, but we're rolling along fairly well. Information, this is where you really start getting a lot of data inside your logs. This is where you're going to really start slowing down your server and having some challenges there. So at this point, unless you're really troubleshooting and being fairly active looking through the system, information probably isn't something you're going to want to turn on that often. And then there's the infamous verbose, in which point you need to be looking at this actively. You need to be working with the data that's coming out and ready to turn it back off as soon as you get the information you need. If you're just sleuthing around, information's probably as high as you need to go. With verbose, you're getting a lot of data about what's happening, but then that's also requiring the server itself to dump a lot of data onto the drive. Each level logs itself and all levels above. So if you look for, if you set logging to error, then you're going to get error and critical. If you do verbose, that's why you're getting so much data. You're getting verbose, information, warning, error, critical, all the way up the path. Keeping track of that, you're going to have a lot of different data. And new for SharePoint 2013 is the Health Analyzer. This is built to help surface and help fix problems before they get critical. Once you get working with the Health Analyzer, you're going to get spoiled just a little bit with it. You can add rules yourself. The team themselves will be pushing down additional rules as the product's updated or as your internal processes evolve. You can put those in for your own piece. One of the really nice things about the Health Analyzer is you can actually set it to try and proactively resolve errors. When it comes up, you can actually see what's going on. It can do things like do IIS resets, see what it can do with dumping memory and freeing up information, all of those kind of things. So you actually get a system that's kind of a watchdog. When you see errors, when you see situations happening, it's going to go in and see what it can do to make things better. And you do need to know that usage data needs to be collected and analyzed to support. When we get into the demo, we'll look at some of that information. That being said, there's already a lot of information being collected through the default install. So if you forget about this when you're putting together your server, you're still going to get some support on this. It's just if you got custom rules or the rest, you'll probably need to come back and add some additional information. And then we come down to the timer jobs. This is not new for SharePoint 2013, but if you're an experienced administrator, you'll know that generally the timer jobs are one of the big challenges of keeping track of. They are regularly scheduled processes for the server farm. SharePoint itself keeps track of this. It's got a number of different things that needs to be done. The timer jobs are where you set up your indexes and your crawls and your actually synchronization with your Active Directory. All of those things that are batch jobs that need to be batched up and run at intervals are run through the timer job system. Your processes can actually have multiple schedules defined, and when we look at these, you'll see that generally they are. You can actually have hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. You've got lots of options here for putting those in, but that you can have multiple schedules that come into play, and the timer job system will actually make sure that they don't collide with each other. Regular review can identify issues early. This is one of the key pieces, because as you're looking at the timer jobs, if you're getting an error, if those timer jobs aren't running completion, a common issue is maybe an index server is having problems and throwing errors. Well, watching those timer jobs and making sure that they're either running correctly or an error has caused that timer job to become disabled. Searches still work. Your users are still moving forward, but new information is not being put into the system. Those indexes aren't being updated, and you can get a pretty far way down the path without realizing that. And just a quick check on the timer jobs would make sure that doesn't happen. So those are kind of your primary monitoring tools working with SharePoint and on the server side. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a demo of the logging. We're going to go to monitoring. We're going to go to Configure Diagnostic Monitoring. We're going to set the SharePoint server logging to critical, and we're going to ensure the limits are on that. So here we are at Central Administration, and we're going to look at the logging configuration. As you see here on the top, we actually have a Health Analyzer notification. So in just a moment, we'll come back to that one as we go through the different options. So first we'll go down to monitoring, and as we go into the monitoring area, what we're going to do is take a look at Configure Diagnostic Logging. This will give us a list of the logging options that we have. As you can see, we actually have the primary services, and we've got additional information that's tied down through there. By default, we don't have any logging going on these, but you can also see that the event level by default is informational. So if we do need to do some sleuthing, we can actually go in and we've got that information level. We do want to turn that off as soon as we can. What we're going to actually do is go down to the SharePoint server itself, and we'll turn that on. You can see the logging here. We've got information, and we're going to say that informational is the default. We are going to turn it to critical, and we're going to basically set our level to unexpected. We're going to turn on enable log flood protection. What this does is this means that you won't bog down your system if something happens and everything goes nuts. If you've gone through the logging analysis before, sometimes you've seen that one error will be repeated over and over again as the server continually retries. This will just let you basically say, we've raised that event, we're not going to keep dumping it all out there, and then you don't have all the challenges that you have in place. The path for the trace logs is the default here under the Microsoft Shared, which you should be familiar with. Again, I actually recommend moving that to somewhere else, ideally somewhere off of the OS drive. That way, even if something does go wrong, you've got your OS is still in good shape. We're going to store this for. I'm gathering some information, but I'm going to set it up for a weekly store. So we're going to do that. And just to make sure, we're going to restrict the tracelog disk space to, you can see here for tracelogs in gigabytes, we're going to turn that to just 1. I don't need a huge amount. You may choose it differently and choose where you want to go with that. So we're going to come in, we're going to say OK, and then we're going to allow SharePoint to update our changes, and we're going to come back and review and make sure that's there. And here we go. Let's go back to configure logging. And you can see on our SharePoint server, we now have it set to critical and unexpected. So if we get those errors in there, those are going to go into the log and we're going to know what's happening. So that's setting up your logging itself. Let's move over to the next topic. So you've seen how we can actually do diagnostic logging. One of the items that we're looking at now is the usage and health data. Right off the top, we're going to look here. The SharePoint Health Analyzer has detected some critical issues that may require your attention. This is great. I may have some information somewhere in the system, but it's bringing it up front and center. As soon as I go into central administration, it's going, hey, I found something you need to take a look at. It provides me with a nice quick link. So let's go in and first of all, view these issues. So we're going to go down. And here are our problems. We actually see we have a couple. We've got the unattended service account application ID is not specified as invalid value for the Visio graphics service. That happened about 10 hours ago. We actually have one of the cache hosts in the cluster is down. We only have one server going on, so we know something's going on there. And we see that the drives are running out of free space. So that happened about 10 minutes ago. That may have something to do with what we're doing. So let's go ahead and take a look at the drives are running out of free space. So I go in and take a look at the items that we're looking at. This is a Severity 1 error. Category is availability. Here's our explanation. The available drive space is less than twice the value of the physical memory. With the system we're working with right now, we've got a 60 gig hard drive and we've got 24 gig of memory. After we've added our database and our bits and everything, what's happened is we've actually gotten the available space down below about 30 gig. This means that if the system needs to do a full memory dump, it doesn't have enough free space on the hard drive to do that. Right now, I think we're okay. We're not expecting a memory dump, but just to be aware of, that's one of the situations you get into with high memory, fairly restricted storage servers. We can actually see it gives us a remedy, delete the old log space, free space on the drives. We get all that information, get exactly which server we have a problem with. Remember, we've only got one server working right now, but if we've got a server farm that we can have multiple, sometimes dozens of servers, and it'll let us know exactly what's going on at that point. You remember we've got the working with it. This is the timer service. This is letting us know that we've got some information happening there that we need to look at. We can actually go into the rule that is creating this and letting us know what the issue is. So we'll move over to there and review the rule that gave us this warning that we need to look at. So we've got the item here. Scope is, the title is, we get to set that. We've got the scope of all servers. It'll check this hourly and let us know what's happening. We can know that the rule is enabled because we can actually have rules that we retire or we may set up and don't have running yet and be able to work with those pieces. We've got the repair automatically. This is set to no because cleaning up logs and drive spaces is probably not something we want systems to do automatically. And then this is one of the, we can actually version these rules. So as we go through and we change things, we can actually put those in place. What we're going to do now is, since we actually have this rule, we've come down to it, let's look at what we need to do to change it. And you can see we can come in here and edit the rule if we choose to. We can actually say any server or all servers, so we can actually run in and say, let's do any server. Again, we've got only one server, but we can tie into there and say what we've got in place. Any server will actually be appropriate for tasks that are working with the database or with storage or with content. So only one server will run it, but it will do those checks. When we go back to all servers, you can see that this is actually run on every server to make sure that that server is okay. So this is where we're looking at processes running actually on the server, states that the server are in, again, storage like we're looking at here, all of those kind of pieces. We've got our schedule, which we can actually run hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, or on demand only. So we've got some options here on what we're doing. If it takes a while to run a rule, we may want to move it back down to daily or weekly if that's going to give us the best use of our resources. Right now, hourly, I want to know when those servers are starting to get into trouble with their storage. We'll leave that here. Basically, it's enabled, so we know where it's checking there. We're not going to repair automatically. We know that we don't really have a rule that we want it to do here, and we'll update this to version 1.1. Let's save that. One thing, while this is saving, you can attach files here. This is actually very good if you've got a central administration group or some pieces that put out the processes. You can actually attach, say, a Word document or a PowerPoint document or Excel spreadsheet to each of these rules, so that if there is a process that needs to be done to repair or actually manage any of these items, it's right there. It's attached to the rule, so you know exactly what needs to be done, even if maybe the process people aren't there, and operations staff can actually do their checklist and see exactly what's going on. Maybe even reporting rules or forms that they can fill out to say, hey, I ran into this and this is what's going on. So that's the individual rules. We come back to the Health Analyzer rules definitions. This is actually coming from a slightly different area, so let me bring you back into Central Administration and show you how to get here without going through an error. We'll go back to Central Administration and back to our monitoring. We've actually looked at our rule. We understand that everything's okay on that point, so we'll go through and clear that out in a moment. And now we'll go to our review rule definitions. This is where we were. Go to monitoring, and then under Health Analyzer, you can actually see those rules definitions. You can actually see that these are the rules that are set up by default. The SharePoint team has done a good job of giving us a lot of options as we go through. You can see that they're actually checking a number of different items. This is our 1 of 30. You can see we've got quite a few rules here that's actually checking what's going on. Drives are running out of free space, or out of risk of running free space, orphaned items, lots of different things in here that can really make sure that your system keeps working. You can actually change the how you view the rules here. We'll go through and do some filtering. And you can see that we've actually got the ability to sort on the schedule, on the enabled, or the repair automatic. So if we want to actually go through and say, I only want to see rules that aren't set to repair automatically, I can go through here and start creating my processes and attach to those rules like we were talking about. We can actually save this view as well, so if you've got particular configurations or filters you want to look at, you can actually save those and have easy access back to them. As we mentioned, editing, this is where you would add a new rule. Just add a new item as you're coming through the system. Your title that you're coming into play of, we're going to run on any server. We're going to enable it. Version 1.0. We're not going to have it repair automatically. And we will save. Now we have our new rule set up there, and we can actually go in and work with that and have it checked with that information through the configuration. We can actually tie workflows to these and move on from there. So the next item we're going to look at is the timer job. Let's go back to Central Administration, and again we're going to go back into the monitoring section, and we're going to look at the job definitions. Now, as you note, we can look at the actual job definitions themselves. We can see the status, we can see the scheduling, we can see which ones are running and which one of the history. Right now we can actually make sure that everything's in place, see what type of schedule we've got there, and again do any filtering that we're looking for there at the web application of the service. We can actually go in and check and see what their status is. You can see that we've got our start times coming into place. We've got which servers they're going to run on. We know which web application they're associated with, so we've got things in place there. Look at the scheduled jobs. Again, we've got the next start time. We've got the information. Again, pretty similar, but we know what's happening there. And right now we don't have any running jobs. We've got a fairly simple server here, but if we had an index crawl or if we had a content management system going through here, if we maybe had a cleanup job going on, we would see those running jobs going here. And then we go over into the job history and we can see exactly what's going on. View those statuses. We can see that we've got an aborted job here. We may want to look and see what's happening. This is where we can actually proactively work through the jobs, see where we may have some issues, being able to see, again, that application server administrative service job timer is throwing it aboard again. So if we see those happening quite a few times, we can dig into those jobs, determine what we're going on, and be very active in making sure that we understand what's going on with that. This is an indication that something may be going wrong. We need to dig in a little deeper and make sure that our farm and our servers stay very healthy.